quarter Halloween moon. About 2 a.m. here on the East Coast, getting the first glimpses of this really good shot tonight. This morning, rather. Kind of faded myself, but it was too good to pass up. Last few nights have been really kind of just that cold front moving through. So it's looking nice and sharp, certain regions tonight. Almost, I want to say about 52% illuminated. Just gonna check that real quick. 54 coming on the last quarter, rising with Procyon and Sirius. Just gonna do a few wide shots, then do a small, like a short zoomed in tour. And yeah, let me know if you have any comments. Otherwise, I'm gonna let some music play and kind of just hang out here. All right. Hey, what's up, people? How's it going? Chat room filled up rather quick. That's really pretty. So these stars are coming up. I have Stellarium pulled up, but so the first one that came up is they all really just don't have a name. The first one that came out was an 8.4 magnitude. The one after it was a 10.10 magnitude, and the one coming to the left of that is, honestly, I can barely even see it on Stellarium. So yeah, no particular names, just random stuff, but it was pretty prescient to pull up that Earthshine at the appropriate moment, so that was nice, serendipitous, rather. Triangle UFO. What's up, Kenneth? What's up, Hazmat? What's up, George? What's up, Karl Marx? FE Dude, Eric Valdez, Vicky, what's going on? And Kalalau, Soul, what's going on? Whoever else is lurking, having a good, what night is it? It's Wednesday? Yeah, no, it's Tuesday, but rolling into midweek. Glad I got on. It's been kind of blurry for the last couple of nights, but it's really cool how the moon's like kind of just floating. It just feels like it's so in space in that little telescope viewfinder that I have. I kind of want to do a stream soon with a much smaller telescope, kind of see the moon in context. So just chilling here. Pretty fun. Yeah, definitely got that recorded. So before the moon gets too high, I think I'm just gonna get the zoom lens, actually just remove the focal reducer and do some zoomed in shots on the Mare Imbrium region. A little bit of our Humpty Dumpty face on the dark side of the moon. I think I also saw Mark Rowe, what's going on? Eric Valdez, love the earlier shots with the contrast and the craters. Yeah, I'm about to get back to that. Just want to get some good earth shine finally on our last quarter moon. A bit of earth shine last night, but this is way more prominent, way clearer. Alright, formidable opponent coming up.
rescue à retourner. Le fixing the phone, mixing your liquids, now you're left for dead. Just pay your debts. Float, the nearest calling. A souvenir, a soon rescue à retourner. Le fixing the phone, mixing your liquids, now you're left for dead. Just pay your debts. Float, the nearest calling. A souvenir, a soon rescue. Is it
Yo, what's up everybody? So figured I'd hop on, just talk about some of the features we're looking at. Instead of labeling stuff, I don't have it in me to do any labels tonight on the other computer, so we'll talk through a few. Just got some of this some instrumental stuff going on. Alright, what's up there, Justin? What's up everybody? So we got Copernicus at the top of the screen, Kepler underneath that, Aristarchus bottom left, our usual really interesting formation, the kind of triangular feature that these three prominent structures make up, with the Lichtenberg patterns in between them, almost looking like a trio of power generators somehow connected with underground wires. Aristarchus glowing extra bright tonight, but also I do have the contrast turned up slightly to see the details. This is a particular phase and a position of the moon where it kind of feels like it's being lit dully, and I mean there's some great detail tonight, but there's this kind of flatness to it, dare I say. Lots of nice coloring around the Mare Imbrium region. Left of the screen, Sinus Iridum. Notice some interesting shadow near Sinus Iridum. Montes Tenerife, Montes Pico, Montes Recti, and Plato Crater. Inside the rim of Mare Imbrium, Archimedes, Autolycus, and Aristillus. Let me brighten this image up a little bit. So kind of getting harsh contrast, but pulling out the detail. George says, check that's color at Aristarchus on the left. Yeah, let's go down. I just want to do a quick tour back up at the north of Mare Imbrium, and then go down a bit more. That's south of Sinus Iridum. This a bit, and let's zoom in on Aristarchus. I think Herodotus and Schroeder's Valley are going to be hard to see tonight, but let's get in there. Edge is not like, you can see the bottom left edge of the moon has this kind of chromatic orange line on it. A little scintillation happening. Yeah, deep in here on Aristarchus, and let it settle in, and you can see kind of inside part of the crater, definitely glowing strong. And the particular angle that we're looking at it, Herodotus and Schroeder's Valley look very undefined. Looks like a big jumble right in the middle of that. But you can see a bit of the dark shapes inside Aristarchus crater itself. Yo, what's up there, Fantasy? How's it going? Just doing a little late night lunar tour. Happy Samhain, and Halloween Eve. Just a marker in the weird thing we call time, but truly just a wondrous vision to have our celestial being just hanging out with us, looking all insane and old. Rusty old moon. Let's drift across to the eastern portion and check out what's going on with Tycho crater and Clavius. Turn up the ISO on that. Get it zoomed in here. Yeah, I was noticing earlier that Tycho is looking good, so let's get in and just sit on the shot for a second while it resolves. Yeah, so tonight there are certain features that are better than others. I feel like this area with the sharp contrast near Tycho is looking good. Look at those waves coming through. Nothing really sharp like those pulses, but just big atmospheric turbulence waves. Nice definition on Aristarchus on Tycho crater with its central peak. Let's scoot over to Clavius, see what's going on. Somebody, yeah. There we go. Cool, so Clavius with a chain of craters in it. I'm trying to remember what the largest one is, but it's escaping me right now. I want to say something with a P, but I can't remember it. I feel like there's Schiller and Schickard crater to the north of it. Maybe starting to come into shadow. Let's look at these little features near Clavius. I think this is Maginus. I could be wrong. Almost like a diamond shape. Yo, what's going on? Luis Richard Dominguez, how's it going? Happy Halloween from Panama. Shout out to Panama. Thanks for joining. It's rolling on 2:30 here. I still got a little energy left. With a view like this and some company, I'm all good. I'm all good. Toast to all of y'all. Hope this week is bearing fruitful tidings for all of you. So let's go under this little Terminator line shadow area, because this is what I was looking at with the eyepiece right before I started streaming. I was like, man, I gotta get on for a second, because it's looking all fun over here. I'm gonna adjust the contrast a bit. Now let's just follow the whole Terminator edge all the way back to Mare Imbrium and just check out all these great pentagonal and hexagonal diamond-shaped craters. And some of them have these great offset peaks. Forgive me, I'm not gonna know some of these names coming through, but let's just tour and just enjoy the images, and if I remember some of them, I'll call them out. Also, interestingly enough, like I'm noticing as we're going through here, I want to say, I know what these are called, but I don't right now, but I feel like we're looking at a double lobed shape. And some of you that follow Electric Universe, they talk about like asteroids and some meteors, I think. But asteroids really having this double lobed shape that is bred of plasma. I wonder if these are these squished craters next to one another, quite large regions. Yo, what's up there, Mario? Yeah, thanks for the confirmation. George Kolosowski is helping me out in the chat. Says Maginus and Longomontanus, almost brothers, similar. Yeah, I find it very interesting. There are a couple of them, like Posidonius and Gassendi are kind of sister or brother craters, and you got like a couple of regions that look like Sinus Iridum, like smaller, like kind of bay-shaped formations. So throw me if you know any of these names that passing by this kind of double-lobed shape with these two little sinuous rills. Definitely looking like, I mean, if you look at it really kind of squinty, you kind of see it's like two little hexagons, like beehive kind of hexagons next to one another. And then keeping on, moving on. I want to say these are like Katharina and not sure, don't think it's Theophilus, but great hexagon flat floor. This is a neat little feature right here. Just gonna focus in on it. Yeah, normally I have the Atlas pulled up, but I'm just like sitting at the other computer and just enjoying the view. So naming wise, whatever I can remember. But I feel like, yeah, we're coming up on the Apennine Mountain Range and Copernicus. Yeah, looking great. Let's get up here to the Apennine Mountain Range, which is one of my favorite regions as well. And Eratosthenes crater will be at the very tip of where the mountains reach into Oceanus Procellarum. It's coming up right here. I'm trying to say a little less. So there's Eratosthenes. Really fascinating how it does really jut. It juts right into the crater, the Apennine Mountain Range, and just follow it. And immediately got some pareidolia happening, where you got some weird elephant, demon face, dog face coming up in the mountain range. And then some kangaroo action looking at me. This is really close up. Digging these kind of tormented regions. Yeah, that big crater I was mentioning earlier, the hexagonal one, Ptolemaeus. Thank you, George. Right, Purback, exactly. Cool. I'm a little bit ahead of y'all, about 20 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. So just going up the Apennine Mountain Range, we've got Autolycus, Aristillus, and Archimedes. Archimedes on the bottom, Aristillus and Autolycus on the top. I believe Autolycus is the smaller one to the right, having their own inverted crescent shapes. Almost like a 30% crescent moon. Archimedes having that kind of inverted look as well. Not shadow, but more like, is it jutting out or is it convex or concave? Really cool pareidolia. This region is fantastic. It's always surprising me. I feel, because one, you rarely get it this clear. And this kind of shadow against the Terminator gives you a lot more contrast, I feel. So I'm just gonna scout around a little more. What's up there, Adam Star? How's it going? Just trying to keep the image steady tonight. This 11 does definitely do a great job though. Tracking's alright. You can see these tiny little features right here next to Autolycus, which are interesting, casting a long shadow, little star shapes. I love it that I'm pointing at the screen while talking to y'all. Then we go a bit further, and I want to say that's Cassini crater, the one that feels like a very complicated crater. It has its own little mini craterlet, a couple of mini craterlets inside it. And then we're reaching another one of my favorites, which is the Alpine Mountain Range, which is Montes Alpes, right? So the Alpine Mountain Range at an angle, of course, because it's a particular waning phase of the moon. We get Valles Alpes really looking at us, or like facing us in this very interesting direction where you can see like the Alpine Valley cut very clearly over here. Great contrast. I'm going to zoom in a bit more. I want to say this is like a 200, 300 kilometer stretch, sinuous. Oh, I don't think it's a sinuous rail. I believe it's just like a gash cut through these mountains. Let me know if you can see it all right. There's almost like this little forked mouth, but it divides the mountains. And if we had a higher powered scope, probably see that there's a little thin rail about 10 kilometers across that goes through it dead center. What's up, Edward? Tentacle says, Crater, I do like this. Auto like this? Auto like this video, y'all. It always reminds me of that. Alright, so right here, normally Plato is kind of trying to find some tunes here to talk over. Let's see, what about, yeah, this one's good. Yeah, so right here, let me zoom out one level so you guys can see what I'm looking at. So this whole region with the kind of curved, giant like mountain range, this mountain range on the right-hand side is called the Apennine Mountain Range, and then it leads into that area we were just zoomed into called the Alpine Mountain Range. And then that crater, the flat-floored one at the edge of that to the left, is called Plato. I'm going to zoom in on Plato right now so you can have a point of reference to what I'm talking about. So as I said earlier, the moon's at such an interesting phase right now, waning, that these features are aimed at us in a really particular direction that is not common to see. So you're getting different variations on the elliptical nature of craters. You know, some that are more circular are stretched, and some that are stretched are less stretched. So Plato looks different to me right now. It looks very, very dead on. And you can see the broken wall at the south side right now. And the whole region around Plato Crater, of course, is also particularly interesting because you're looking at it like it almost looks like you're basically on top of it. Adam Star says, where's the Apollo junk? So I'll point out stuff as I pass through it, but since the moon is in this phase, a couple of, like at least 3 or 4 of the missions are on the other side of the dark side, on the dark side of the moon. That happened, or allegedly happened, in the Sea of Tranquility and Sea of Serenity, and that region, which is right now not illuminated. There are a couple, I believe, like Apollo 17 and others, and the Chinese rover that happened nearby here, or allegedly happened. Looking here at also these couple of neat features, just notable ones. Montes Recti at the bottom. Montes Tenerife is this little claw, like the raptor claw, chicken foot. And Montes Pico, next to that, the kind of sharp little white mountain by itself. Hey, peace out, Eric Valdez. Have a good one. Yeah, thanks for corroborating that, George. That's what I thought. I feel like we're looking at a portion of the moon that's less explored. Although I feel like definitely we should have some stuff. Damn, where did the... No, that's not what I was trying to do. Get back. Focus magnifier. There we go. Yeah, so I was talking about the Chinese Chang'e rover right around here. This is the mouth of Sinus Iridum, or the Bay of Rainbows, so the northern portion of that bay region. And George Kolosowski's saying Chinese U2 lander just right of Montes Recti, which we're taking a look at right around here. Interestingly enough, the Chinese rovers both aimed at similar regions, like very close together, and landing there as well. Very impressive. Let's take a look at Copernicus. It looks very bright and maybe hard to see, but let's try a zoomed in shot here. Atom Star, you know, whether you doubt the moon landings or not, it would really be, you know, given the scale and the nature of the size of things and the scope that I'm looking at, you know, that we're using right now. Just really not a possible thing to see tire tracks or anything like that. I don't think we could see ships. I don't think we could see bases or cities or anything like that. I feel like if the proportions are correct, you know, we're looking at, let's say, this Copernicus crater right now we're zooming into. This is something on the scale of 70 kilometers across, you know, if you can imagine. And the details just, you know, it's astounding for what we have here, but really considering trying to get to see actual tire marks of anything or something that's, I don't know, 10 meters across or less, it seems impossible. So I understand why homebrew astronomers can't do it. I feel like we might have telescopes on Earth that could do it, potentially like the Subaru or the Keck telescope, or there are good questions as to why we don't have great pictures, but homebrew, it's not even a thing, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, everybody's got their opinion in this reality as to what happened or what didn't happen. I kind of suspend my judgment because I know that there's very high-level technology. And so I'm not sure it's necessarily impossible, but I definitely doubt my fair share of stories. I don't know, I think it's just much more fun to consider that we're people interacting with the moon versus that we need to, like, I don't know, land on it and walk on it and kind of soil it in a way. I think it's just nice to know that we have this guardian of sorts. Just always there, almost telling time and telling us when to plant things and maybe when to live and die. Really great shot tonight, damn. Never ceases to amaze. I know all these moon missions are planned and everything. I sit and spend year after year passes by and these missions yield almost no results. And I don't know, maybe I'm just being pessimistic or I'm cynical, but I feel like given that we apparently went that long ago, you know, lunar travel should be a basic thing. You know, rovers should be going to the moon regularly. And people should be going to the moon at least on a regular basis, like maybe once every few years, men should be, or women should be sent to the moon. But it seems like this, like, out of control quest. I'm gonna go on my little lunar rant. I mean, it's absurd that it was done and it's treated like it's not the most astounding achievement ever made. And it really is. If it really happened the way the videos show and all this stuff shows, which is very possible, then it's truly the most astounding feat that's ever occurred. And yet there's no national holiday. People treat the moon missions almost like a political statement, like a concept, when in fact it's quite literally the most astounding thing that's ever happened, ever. I don't know. Let me know if you agree with me. The level of complexity I feel is taken very lightly, because there's this idea that NASA or space agencies have sent these robots to the outer reaches of the galaxy, like solar system. For example, like Voyager missions or the Pluto missions, Juno, or Saturn or Cassini, and what's the other one that went to Pluto? I forget that one. The New Horizons mission. So I feel like, oh, the moon's no big deal, but quite literally sending humans to the moon is like I said, the most astounding thing ever, on every level. And so it's very Twilight Zone how it's treated like complete mythology in our lifetime. I mean, even if you're not going back to the moon, it should literally have a national holiday, and it should be it should be talked about every day. It should be front page news, even still today. And it's treated really like, oh, you can do it or you can't. You know, space is this nebulous thing. Oh, maybe people are working on it, and things happen, and it's a political gesture, or you're an idiot, and all these things. But really, it's astounding. I mean, it's nothing short of a straight up miracle to land a human being on what we're looking at right now, the moon, at any level, at any distance, unless it's literally right like 200 miles away, which I don't know. Some people think it is 200 miles away, or it's not even real, but I don't know, man. If it's really 250,000 and you can travel there in 6 days and actually stand on it, then I feel like it's completely being played down. All right, that's my rant. I'm done. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can say it very sweepingly and say a lot of people don't believe in it, you know, but there shouldn't really be a conspiracy about this. It should really be a unifying concept that we as earthlings have achieved, and it certainly doesn't feel like that. You know, and it's very simple to understand why I feel that way, because every discussion about it ends up coming back to either money or political gesture. And going to the moon is not about either of those two things. Even if they've been tied together in the public eye, like, they're certainly not tied together. The moon is not political. It doesn't run on politics, and it certainly doesn't, we don't pay it to run. It's almost like your body in a way. Like, your body will run whether you're a slave to the fiat currency system or not. Or it will run very poorly on Monsanto GMO, but it'll still run. So the moon is just like this thing that exists with us or in us, and again, treated like total mythology. Like, oh yeah, totally, we went to the moon, been there, done that, no big deal. Chinese government sends these rovers that send back these abysmal photos. You have photos from way deep inside people's gestation cycles, and you have so sorry that maybe I'm going a little too far here, but they film nearly everything in such graphic and disgusting detail on Earth. Yet when you spend these millions and I don't know, billions of dollars to get to space, and you send these really rudimentary cameras, and then people question it, and they're saying, well, you know, we're not there to sightsee. It's this aggressive condescension that is just a guise for irrationality. And yet, you know, my conspiratorial mind will say, pull back the curtain and you'll find somebody pulling some sort of strings at some level, trying to make you look away from the man behind the curtain. But we still have the real moon, or at least we hope so, staring us down, keeping us, I don't want to say grounded, mooned. Fantasy, here, I want to be proven wrong. I want to say, like, that I've researched a lot of this stuff, but let's look at Fantasy says Jade Rabbit sent a bunch of images back. But I'm talking about like the mere fact that you can that there's no footage. There's no like real like, you know, a stream of images. Even like that's why in a way like I actually doubt my own suspicion of Apollo, because the images are kind of fantastic. Like it's stuff that, forget the actual landing videos and the weird stuff that people point to, but the actual photos seem very difficult to fake. Like you have to send some robot out there to kind of look at Earth from a distance and look at the moon from a distance. There are certain shots that I feel like I can't for sure say that's bullshit. But I will say that like with the current level technology that consumers have, the fact that you're sending a 10, 20, 30, $100 million mission to the moon, with what kind of certainty are you not sending, you know, your best camera gear, which is tiny and can record at every level and can send back data streams from the moon, which should be, like, we've been sending data to the moon since the 30s and 40s, or like back and forth from the moon. So I don't buy the whole low-tech camera because budgetary reasons, or we're not sightseeing, or any number of things. However, so I pulled up the Jade Rabbit missions, so I'm not like just talking shit. And yeah, they're amazing in one context, but in another context, they look like any sandy parking lot. Like, why are you not sending a spherical 1.8 f1.8 lens, you know, on a time lapse, and sending like the movement of the stars from the moon? Like that would be the only thing. The first thing I would do is do that. The second thing I would do is probably land near any of the other old sites and take a picture of them. Just one photo of any of the previous missions. They can never do that. It's never been done. Mars, similarly. Mars, they never land near something else. Now, granted, you could say these places are massive, and how could you land in the same place, and blah, blah, blah. But then they also tout the fact that they can do this thing and land in these precise places. So you can't have it both ways. You know, the Mars missions, I've watched all of them, and the way they talk about it is like, we landed in this tiny area that we pinpointed. It's a crazy fucking miracle. We did it. It's amazing. But then you ask them for specificity, and you're like, no, it's this incredibly difficult thing. How could we possibly know? And it's impossible to ever tell. And, you know, so publicly, it's always both sides of it, and it completely muddies any discussion. Adam Starr says, we've had numerous meteor showers in the past year and a half. Has the moon's surface even changed slightly? So, you know, if we're looking at it together right here, and like I said, there's this giant crater, Copernicus, at the bottom of your screen, 70 kilometers across roughly. You can imagine that these meteors are fragmented down to almost dust in terms of these scales. So meteors even hitting the moon en masse would be so difficult to detect at all. They wouldn't be creating any type of impact craters that you could imagine. In fact, like, I don't even believe that a lot of these are impact craters at all. In fact, I think that they're electrical scarification and or volcanic activity on the moon based on electrical activity from recent past or from, you know, ages ago, who knows. But the moon's surface is carved and less impacted. But even if it were impacted, it would be quite impossible to see tiny impacts on a regular basis. So I'm getting links that are, this Dutch guy, amateur for starters, did what? Let's see, Ralph Vanderberg, I remember this guy. Professional photographer, is known for photographing the sun and the moon from Earth using a telescope-mounted camera. I'm not sure what you referenced Vanderberg do. I definitely have seen somebody talk about him or a documentary with him before, but I'm not sure what you're referencing. Sorry. George says, of course the moon's surface has changed slightly since it's been packed by micrograins for centuries and millennia. You know, that's what we say. What I'm saying is, like, can we actually see it with a scope? And I don't think we can. You know, I know some people think they can, or they claim they have, but it doesn't seem like you can see changes in the actual surface, or at least anything of note. Yeah, this is not really to do with the shape or anything like that. It's more about the political and mythological nature of the moon that I'm talking about. It's just such a ridiculous way it's talked about. And the way I feel about the moon is this very different feeling, like the fact that we exist on an Earth with a moon. It's just pretty incredible. And once you come to terms with that, you just really want to understand what this thing is and what it does and why it's there. And it doesn't really drift down this list of priorities, you know, and what's happened maybe in America specifically, but in general, people have relegated the moon to this myth, like I said. It's like a story, or it's part of a stupid movie, like Transformers, sadly. Where people are just bored with the moon in general, and they're bored with the conspiracy, and they're bored with people who believe in the moon landings, and they're bored with talking about it, and it's just so sad and also ridiculous. It feels very strange. George, that's a fair point. For me, I don't see laboratory experimentation that shows these types of markings. It seems like you'd have a ton more debris, especially things like Copernicus. What size object hit that would create something like Copernicus with those rays coming out? And I would ask you the same thing about Kepler and Aristarchus, and in particular Aristarchus Plateau. So I've seen the kind of simulation where the entire Stellarium basin, this whole dark region, has been carved out by some sort of, you know, either it was because it was accretion disk, you know, compartmentalization and creating this rocky sphere that was not even, and this basin was there, or the basin was carved out and then it filled with lava around features like Copernicus and Aristarchus and Kepler, or did these lava pits or the Stellarium basin fill up entirely and then they were struck by these massive meteor strikes that created Copernicus, Kepler, or Aristarchus? And I'm just pointing to these three because particularly I don't see physically any laboratory experiments that show bullet impacts impacting a surface and creating these features. These look more like glass shattering, or even volcanic shapes that I've seen. Radar pictures of Earth look more like this than actual impacts of meteors. So that's my take on that. So George says, but they have caught 400 impacts now that they started dedicating watch, 10 years ago. So I follow all the, as many moon sites and videos as I can, and there are always articles like that say, we have this, or we've tracked this. For example, like the tracking of all the space junk, or the tracking of objects that are these tiny, tiny sized objects in space. And somehow there are statistics and analytics on tracking these objects, but no actual visual corroboration. And so unless I'm missing certain types of instruments that do magic that I don't know about, besides spectroscopy and radio telescopes and visual telescopes with tracking devices that we know and use on a commercial level, I'm not understanding how, thousands of tiny pieces of space junk are tracked, and how you can see impact craters on the moon that are 10 meters across, but you can't take a picture of any of the landers from Earth. So which telescopes in particular are actually, and which amateurs are taking photos of impacts on the moon that are actually corroborated? And so if I'm missing that data, I'm happy to look at it. I just don't see it. Yeah, but plain physics, if you see laboratory experiments with people blasting sand and clay and any type of materials with 70,000 volts, a volt discharge, and holding it there for a second, it creates blisters in the surface that look just like the craters on the moon. And I see far fewer bullet impacts and ballistic videos that look like craters on the moon. They always look like sand that caves in on itself. They very rarely create these very carved out shapes that we see on Plato and Copernicus and many other features on the moon that have very sharp walls and flat floors. So if those are impacts, then I can't see the physical relationship myself. And maybe I'm just blind to that, but I have no desire to have a confirmation bias about the electric universe. I don't see the physical relationship, and that's a shame. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Kepler like a paintball splatter, but Kepler, let's zoom in on Kepler, it also has a lot of geometry. So it's coming out in shapes that look like filaments, and they're coming out in almost a very radial shape. They have even increments. At least the bottom left part of Kepler, you have it on the screen right now, looks like a star shape. So you have a 6 o'clock, a 7, 8, 9, 10. All these rays are coming out in a very, I think patterns are electrical. And so I feel like nature almost sorts itself electrically. And you can see very, very clearly that these structures, or whatever, the filaments that you see stretching from crater to crater, are, you could say Copernicus got impacted by an object that is larger or smaller than it, let's say, and it got blasted. But then what is the damage? Where's the damage to that region? Something that large, if you look at the simulation, something that large hitting any type of structure on the moon would blast it into high hell, not create this very sharp wall. At least, listen, I don't know much about ballistics, to be honest, but it's a visual thing for me. Yeah, so George Kalasowski says, don't forget the moon surface lava was cooling, the drying mud over 3 billion years, and the changes the base. So, same thing. We're coming from a place, from two different places. For me, I love science and I love the truth, but I don't know if I can really completely always say, okay, it's definitely 3 billion, it's definitely 13.7 billion, it definitely was a big bang. These things are not exactly perfect at this point. So I don't know if the moon went through bombardment phases. I don't know if we captured the moon. I don't know if it's a sister planet in its own rotation around the sun. I don't really know that. I can say that a government agency wants me to know that. But I actually, when I look at the moon itself, I garner a whole other set of facts. And I honestly don't really care much necessarily about being right about electrical universe. It just seems like electricity has always fascinated me. It does produce things like cymatics, along with electromagnetism, things like sonoluminescence. These things are real, and we see them in our day-to-day existence. So the idea that lightning carved shapes on the moon is honestly not a stretch. It's just a stretch for common science to make a leap into new understanding. But I don't want to be condescending or patronizing to anyone. No one has to really believe it. Wow, rolling into 3 a.m. here, full chat, just talking about some moon stuff. This is just my opinion after watching the moon for so long and being into all the different conspiracies. Like right now, I don't really care much about all of that, but I do like to look at the moon and feel like I am not fooling myself and just listening to some authority figure tell me their version of lunar history. So I'm just looking at the moon thinking, wow, Copernicus, that's pretty amazing. That feature reminds me of such and such a thing. So hope we can yeah, I know the story. I definitely know the story. I just don't think there is a reference point for saying it's definitely aged this far. And getting into it at 3 a.m. is probably not the best thing to talk about how the idea of the Big Bang is just there because you have to start working from a groundwork, and it was hypothesized, and there's a lot of math around it, but it's not the be-all and end-all in terms of what I live in my life. A lot of people don't agree, that's fine, but there's a real arrogance to think that we've evolved as men and women to think that we know exactly what happened at the moment of all creation and to say, yep, that's it for sure. Here's a number associated with it, and if you disagree, you're wrong. So I don't know if the moon, I don't know how old the moon is because I wasn't there when the moon first got here. And so all of it is hearsay at this point. Listen, anyway, it's not to get into a deep debate. Everybody has their opinions and theories. There's no really getting in or out of a debate about the moon, mostly because it's what you want to believe. If you want to believe that men walked on the moon, then that's what you're going to believe. If you want to believe that the Earth is flat, same thing. I choose to believe that this moon was carved by electrical discharge between planets because it seems visually obvious to me. I don't care what agencies say. Does that make sense? So, fair point to you, like all the things you're saying are not things that I haven't read, are things that I've definitely read in the past. Just getting through to this point, but that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to share the moon from a perspective of this is your moon to do what you will with. Mathematics are beautiful, it's an art form. It doesn't determine reality, just like you can't draw a bagel and then eat it. You can draw a bagel that looks just like some of these Italian speed artists on YouTube, man. They can draw a bagel, they can paint a bagel or a can of Coke or whatever so perfectly that it looks so appealing and realistic, but it's not the real thing. So you can paint a picture of evolution and a 13.7 billion-year-old universe and things coming from nothing and dark holes, dark matter, dark energy, black holes, light speed limitations that humans impose on light. Isn't that the height of all arrogance? And even further, the height I find of arrogance, I might lose some people here, is people like Carl Sagan chastising humanity as being this lecherous bunch, when in fact, we're here to experience this. And to throw us in the far realms of a Goldilocks zone where we somehow exist, when in all odds, in all probabilities, we might be the only things that actually exist, and that's all we really know right now. So, I want to live in theoretical probability land. I respect that, but for me, it's very basic, and it's just about like waking up every day and feeling like, man, I'm part of this really strange cosmic reality with a network of these interesting conscious nodes floating around in magnetic bubbles, and we sometimes interact and we sometimes don't, and there's this weird virus called language which connects us, and there's this weird thing called the internet that somehow also connects us, but it's part of us. There's a narrative that's pushed in reality that for me is just so obnoxious at this point, and it's not that people are obnoxious, it's just the narrative that we're somehow lucky to be alive. It's a bullshit thing that bullies do. Bullies basically make you feel shitty at every corner, and the government is a bully, Yeah, Tom says something great. It says, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Very good. Yeah, I mean, it's not a nutshell anecdote, but if you want to really see the state of affairs, look at physics channels and astronomy channels that are not like this and Phil, P and K, and just independent people just doing their own thing, and you'll see that we have a YouTube filled with 2-minute physics and kindergarten level understanding of optics, and no pictures from the large telescopes, and questions galore about things that should be unifying. It's so absurd to be right when you can't be together. What do you want to be right all by yourself? It's this very silly, injected false the Hegelian dialectic, where they divide and conquer people using a particular type of methodology, which is you give people the tools to destroy themselves. And somehow we get to exist in a reality where we also can get a telescope and stream to some people. Look how many people we are, 17 people? And maybe several lurking other people who are not registered on YouTube, somehow monitoring the stream, but 20, 25 people maybe interacting on a momentary basis in time about this one truly important thing, which all of society basically looks at as this ridiculous story about, oh, it's green cheese, oh, it's the flag, oh, but it's like, it's a straight up deity. It's a god or a goddess, a celestial body of unbelievable proportion and style and importance, treated completely insanely on this planet. George says, the human-centric concept, yes, Sagan doesn't consider that life chemistry happens everywhere all the time and not just carbon-based at 75 sitting on the beach. Yeah, listen, I've always said, no, I haven't always said, I have said that I don't believe in aliens, but I really just don't believe in the version of Hollywood aliens. I don't think that there couldn't be life forms out in the universe. In fact, it's likely that there is life in some capacity everywhere. However, are they humans just like us? That's really interesting, because if we really think that that's the case, then the human condition is quite specific. But the notion that we can, from our limited vantage point, which is always touted, that's the whole thing about people like Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku and the legion of false prophets. They essentially beat you over the head with the fact that you're completely insignificant, while also trying to tell you how significant you are and how interested you are in being insignificant. Now, a lot of people think that's poetic, but in fact it's actually a very sadistic method of tricking people into never really looking for anything further than just saying, I'm in awe. Wow. Some other person knows the answers. However, I definitely sit here and say, wow, we're in awe of the moon, but we are certainly here in a capacity to understand everything about the moon in the way that we want. John Hesse says, did you see P&K's Devil Tower? No, I don't think I did. Alien is a point of view. That's definitely a good way to look at it sometimes, It's like there needs to be an other in order to kind of have something to hate or to point at or to compare oneself to. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing to try and run a science stream or a science channel truly from a scientific perspective with the current state of the way public science is talked about. And that's honest, even with people, it's very difficult to get a conversation going without getting people riled up about their beliefs. and or what they can and can't do about it, because people really like want to fix things. Most people that I talk to just want to fix things, but they really don't have enough time to look into things. They don't have time to look into things like climate change, or they don't have time to look into things like the electorate or democracy or the moon. But because we live in a system where people are also bullied and belittled, they also take headlines as gospel sometimes. And without knowing it, all of a sudden you believe in something like climate change as an entire concept without ever knowing any detail about it. And this is what I think is really, if people were to point out a problem, it could apply to anything. Same thing with the moon. People glom onto the first thing they hear about when they talk about the moon. They're like, oh, do you believe it or you don't believe it? And I'm like, it's not really about believing it or not believing it. It's really about like, what do you want? What do you want out of life? What is the moon to you? So John Hesse says, there is life everywhere we have looked, just like there is matter in every single realm we have examined. So I'm not trying to in any way get into an argument about something like that, but I think there's a bit of the language in what you just wrote of what I'm talking about. So everywhere we have looked and everywhere we have examined, every single realm. And if you analyze those sentences, you may feel like, you may realize that those sentences are statements that have been iterated by these TV show hosts. I haven't personally explored space in a spaceship to tell you that there's life on Mars or bacteria on the moon. I personally haven't been to Antarctica. Things like that. When you get somebody who's on a TV show like CNN or MSNBC or any of these paid Discovery Channel things, I don't know how far you can really trust these people, only because they're entertainers. They're not supposed to be telling you the truth. We live in a society where that's not, commonly known, but this whole country is basically a company, and the media is their PR firm. And if people treated things like that, I think it would change very quickly. But it's really still treated as if there's some semblance of a democracy, but there really isn't. So I feel like people on the news and people who are trying to talk about science, and I'm just going to call them out because whatever, life is short. People like the Universe Today guy, Fraser Cain, and Tony Darnell from Deep Sky, whatever, and even the guys from the Oxford physics shows, and Shira Tidal, whatever her name is, agent from Vintage Space, and Joe Rogan, and all of them. Just listen to it. They hate you. They hate you with a passion. They hate all people who question. They're out, and I know that's a really that's a heavy statement to make, but I've watched those videos countless times until the point where you just realize that it's about appealing to this really generic way of thinking where you say, hey, we're not arrogant at all, but then you postulate something extremely arrogant right after saying that you're not arrogant. And that's how this company does business. So if you want to do business differently, then go about your business differently, which is obvious, but it's not easy. Anyway, those are some thoughts. So, when I talk about moon conspiracy stuff, I don't talk about it lightly at all. It's not a joke. It's treated like a joke, but really for me it's just a sad state of affairs that we can't have a unified idea about the moon. And you can't deny that people who definitely, believe for sure that we landed on the moon and walked as a human race on the moon have some sort of idea that people who think the opposite are crazy, and that's really a sad state, to be honest. Because everybody's a person who just wants to feel good about things. I don't think anybody really wants that conspiracy to be true. It's just gotten really deep and ugly. George Kalasowski says, like the Urey Miller experiment, simple, but 60, 70 years ago now with what that showed, and it could not stop happening anywhere here or out there, just temp, pressure, composition, talking about life happening in other parts of the solar system. Like I said, I definitely think that that's a possibility, not saying that it's not. Just the idea that people are evolving into humans with talk shows and iPods and things like that, I just don't know that that's something that I can think about and say, yes, definitely at some point we'll find a planet or an exoplanet or whatever number of things with a human being that has a pair of jeans and sneakers. So that's where I draw my line. You know, as many cool books and thoughts and stuff like that. In fact, if you want to take that further, that I kind of go into the Terence McKenna realm, where I feel like the idea of aliens like that are actually in your mind and through this extrasensory experience, and much less out in space. Ooh, I got some cat fights going on outside. Or is that like possum fight? Homeless possum fight going on. Like, I don't know, you know, you say, let's see, I got a couple of comments. Says, Asthmatic says, I concur, they're just taking a paycheck, a mouthpiece for those in control. Well, I don't know if those are, I mean, they're in control. No, I don't want to say they're in control, because I've actually realized that there has to be a negative and evil, you know, quote unquote, evil force in the universe, and as part of the entropic and ever-moving system of the ether. This is something that is the negative, this is the counter space, this is the antimatter. It's a concept, it's a notion of the other. And this is the way we judge good. And so you want the best, you're gonna get the evil, the evilest. And so I don't know if people those people are in control per se. They may be in control of a particular type of system that we live in right now, and until I die, that could be the same system. However, I feel like our words and our thoughts and our actions make up this reality. And so when enough people eventually kind of start realizing that, then I think there might be this thing called, what, you know, a dare I say tipping point, you know, but who knows? Maybe there is no tipping point. Maybe it's always on the edge of destruction, and it just gets to the edge and pulls back. And just gets to the edge and pulls back, this ever-tantric destructive force. Sounds like kids, but I think it's cats. Yeah, let's talk about that. So Fantasy says, man, and that's just observable galaxies. Galaxies are insane. Yes, so yes, they are insane, but at the very fundamental core, there's this idea that galaxies, quasars, nebula, the Oort cloud, Proxima Centauri, galaxy clusters, black holes, all these things are this distance away that's immeasurable. But at the very fundamental core, these distances come from the analysis of several factors. One major one being redshift as a measure of distance, and secondarily the speed of light being, or light in general being a measure of distance. And in several cases, both of these have been proven to be unreliable sources for the measure of distance. So while yes, galaxies are phenomenal, I feel like the idea that we're actually physically connected through filamentary currents in a system means these galaxies are actually part of us right now, and these quasars are part of us right now. So we open our eyes and we're instantly hit by this. We're not hit, we're actually instantly connected through what they call now quantum entanglement. but soon, in 50 years, hopefully, they'll talk about it in terms of plasma and Birkeland currents. But truly, it seems like there's a particle for every other particle, and we take up these particles from space. Like right now, we are taking up, in our tiny little pupil, all the nature, all the beauty of the universe in this tiny little focused pinpoint. In fact, without a true debate and dialogue about optics, vanishing point, electromagnetism, and how that affects optics, I don't even think a discussion about physics in general is even really possible in terms of saying, hey, we know exactly how far away these objects are, we know how many they are, we know how to measure exoplanets, we know how to, like, I've read countless stories, and it's very exciting language, and things like LIGO and LHC, and I could go on all night and talk to you about experiments that I've read and studies and people, and so could you. But ultimately, how is that serving us as humans? It doesn't seem like science is much further along than it was 50, 60 years ago, publicly at least. And I know that, you could argue cell phones and all this stuff, but in terms of people being savvy about technology, we seem to use these tools that we can't build, and therefore we relegate professionalism to the professionals instead of embracing that power. George Kosowski says, life varies, look at flies, humans, and 4,000-year-old olive trees. Yeah, it's all a possibility. I'm definitely not disagreeing of the possible nature of evolution and timescales, and in fact, Earth, in terms of the way I think about reality and consciousness, the way people say the Earth is 13.7 billion years, in their world it may as well be 13.7 billion years old. But for me, particularly, my reality is such that they sound like stories to me. They sound like stories being told by somebody to me about the universe. And the whole thing is to get away from that, or at least for me, is to get away from that type of feeling, because that feeling is very demoralizing. It's not something that I find enjoyable. I don't find it cute. I used to find people like Brian Greene cute, and I thought Neil deGrasse Tyson was quirky and clever, and I thought people like Carl Sagan, because my parents thought he was cool, was super cool because he had a smoking jacket and a turtleneck. And I thought people in Antarctica were the only people who could take ice sample measurements and tell me exact dates of measurements. And I thought that I could never understand spectroscopy, and I thought that I could never understand redshift and what that was. But you ultimately reach a day where you can try and look into all these things, and when you discover that we talking about the universe in a way that's unbelievably arrogant and unfounded and based on what sounds like, now to me, what sounds like religion. And I know that that's very offensive to some people, but I mean no offense. But truly, when you listen to people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku, they sound like preachers to me. And preachers now who question the age of the earth, I'm not saying I've become evangelical or anything like that, I just feel like, those people in a way have been given not a fair shake, because it's kind of good to question these things and to talk about it. So everybody really doesn't get a fair shake, and except a small group of people who are pitting everyone else against one another on these topics. It should be a great open forum. This is what we herald as the great times that have gone by, is this great debate. And what I feel like I'm trying to bring that back a little bit, like with these silly moon streams. Not to denigrate it, just like these small, that's actually, I should take that back. It's not silly at all. It's actually quite important to me and to some of you, I'm sure. So it's really about monitoring the language, 10 years ago I might have been embarrassed by saying, hey, I take that back, I'm not flip-flopping, remember that flip-flopping? Oh, if you flip-flop, then you're not a real human being, all of a sudden. No, people change their minds because life is volatile and the mind is volatile. So it's just about being able to stand up and say, yeah, you think I'm a flip-flopper? Okay, that's fine, that's your opinion. I'm still a better leader. And we don't have that. That's where the debate falls apart in America. They never say, oh, this is an absurd thing. Like, we can't have two terrible candidates run for president and pick one terrible candidate. No, both terrible candidates shouldn't ever be able to run in the first place. And that's never discussed in America. It's like never a thing. To me, that's like that weird Twilight Zone where it's like, you can't mention this, or the ooga booga thing will all fall apart like the tear in time and space fabric. So it's the same thing with like black hole black hole, go back to that. Big Bang and black hole, dark matter, Big Bang, all that type of cosmology. If you try and touch it, it's like a hornet's nest. You get into it and you get all these examples of how it's been proven right. But in fact, it's gotten us nowhere in 50 years. It's gotten us further and further away from the truth into realms, and this is not to espouse exactly what Electric Universe talks about, but they are very eloquent, at least Wal Thornhill is, with how he talks about the scientism. Funnily enough, there was one, talking about like just being fair about it. So I mentioned Tony Darnell, I think, of Deep Space Videos or whatever. He actually has access to NASA people, talks about all the real stuff that happened, or all the stuff that is in the public sphere that's commonly talked about. And he had one show where he did address this idea of extreme scientism, like macho, belittling scientism. And then it was dropped, and he never mentioned it again. And for me, like, that's, there are little cracks in the system. Like, ultimately, everybody, even Universe Today, and Tony Darnell, and the guys from Oxford, and Theoria Apophysis, and Electric Universe, all of them eventually had to tackle Flat Earth, eventually had to tackle actually, Electric Universe hasn't ever talked about the moon conspiracy, which is also one of those things a lot of people are like, oh, they never talk about that because blah, 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 they're pushing the common science. And it does bother me that they never talk about it, even if it is to just dispel the rumor. It's just a shame, not because, I think I was trying to say this earlier, because it's not about retribution. Science shouldn't be about retribution and telling somebody off and being right and kicking somebody's ass. It should be about bringing somebody on board and like taking a ship together and achieving a goal together. Like that's actually a much better feeling from experience. And really telling somebody, oh, you're an idiot because the Earth is this old because other people told me, is just a really, I don't know, man. I think this is what we need to sort of learn how to talk about and potentially modify if people are interested in it. It's like, how do you really talk to somebody without just coming across as somebody who's either fanatical, or just somebody who's about to belittle you. Like, I don't want to talk to people who are just gonna just tell me about every video they watched, Like, all right. Let's see what's going on in the chat room. Sorry, I'm like just talking here. Tom says, no such thing as settled science. Asthmatic says, it's a belief system. We were all indoctrinated into their belief system. Adam Star 68 says, they say all present-day dog breeds started from the wolf. Where in our minds do we see one or the other? I don't know, but like I think about that a lot, about the dogs and the inbreeding and creating, like minifying dogs, making dogs miniature has been a thing that humans have done, and we take it so lightly, or I don't take it lightly at all. I don't own any pets, but I know this is going to hit home for a lot of people, but it's this idea that we somehow are owners of dogs is really a strange concept, and or any creature. And then we talk about like they own us, talking about the elusive they. What did we have? Who else? George says, yes, learn and do spectroscopy, mass and X-ray spectro and radio decay, and why it happens, it can't lie. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. Radioactive decay, one can definitely lie, and has produced many results in different tests that come to odds with other tests, that are at odds with other tests. Have I done that stuff myself? No. So all I've heard just as many stories as it being uncorroborated as it is corroborated, and the scientific part that I know about it is the fact that the idea of radioactive, the isotope decaying over time is based on one extrapolation of current conditions in the pressure and the nitrogen in our atmosphere and the conditions of the ionic temperature on Earth and the solar wind, all of among many other things, but just those things, and potentially the difference in density on Earth and gravity on Earth, that radioactive isotopic decay is something that is variable, and is something that's been proven to be variable in different tests. Now, you can choose to not believe that. I don't want to necessarily believe that we don't have tests that can't prove a certain range of time. But let's say it's foolproof. There is a particular date range cutoff, which is about 30 to 40,000 years, where beyond that it becomes extrapolation. And so I think it's fair in a state of questioning things to say that at a certain point, beyond, let's say, 50 to 100,000 years, even that is a lot, is giving a lot. Beyond that is really theoretical. Now, are there things that happen, or are there theories that support long, billions of years on Earth? Yes, there are stories that support that. Are there other stories that can be postulated that completely decry that theory? Yes, there are also those stories. And it really, you have to be, one has to be discerning. And for me, that's something that I question. John Hesse says science can only be done via friendly cooperation, never via coercion, threats, and fighting. But I agree with that. However, while there is definitely, I'm not saying there's no people collaborating and stuff like that, there's definitely that happening. There's certainly a level of aggression when it comes, and belittling when it comes to popular science and people who question contemporary theories that are very up for debate. For example, the formation of the moon is still an up for debate theory. It doesn't seem that way, and it's not presented that way, but it certainly is up for debate. The idea of the graviton, the idea of the Higgs boson, even though it was agreed to by committee, is still, these are theoretical particles leaving impressions that are being interpreted by a board of scientists. And you can say that because these people have gone through this rigorous training of a certain type, therefore they are more qualified than you to make a call as to whether a graviton is leaving our dimensional reality because it has less power, for example, than like a muon or a gluon or any number of topspin quark or any number of these things. Let's talk about neutrinos, for example, theoretical particles. We're talking about shadows here, ghosts. If you really look at the theory stuff, if you just take it as excerpts from news articles, you might actually believe it to be gospel. And I don't know what you believe necessarily. I'm not talking to anyone specifically. I'm just saying that when you really look at what they're talking about, when you really read the articles, there's a lot of maybes, there are a lot of words like bafflement, puzzlement, back to the drawing board, scientists shocked, scientists surprised. Very few articles are scientists created massive breakthrough for energy. Scientists solve water crisis in Africa, scientists, etc. Things like that. Now, do they want to solve those things? No. However, I don't understand why we have these insanely ridiculous other articles, like, for example, people get excited about the LIGO experiments and the fact that these guys got a Nobel Prize for discovering what essentially amounts to like an aberrant shift in a graph. And so people take it seriously and they think these guys are better than they are because they've spent more time and money on these machines and these concepts. But it doesn't make them, in my opinion, better than me or smarter than me in any capacity further than the fact that they're good in that field, you know? So, right? So they might have not spent nearly as much time on a telescope, or maybe they have, you know, but that idea that all of a sudden, because they have this type of stature that's been, that they wear like a badge, all of a sudden that they're smarter or better is just a silly notion to me. A lot of people don't think that. A lot of people think a PhD validates you as a human being, but to me, I've seen many a PhD with very short-sightedness, with a lot of short-sighted, with short-sightedness, yeah, who are short-sighted. So losing the view of the moon, been chatting for maybe like 40 minutes solid about this stuff. I feel very strongly about it. I feel like we do really have to change the way the language happens and the way we approach science, if anything is to change. And maybe things are not supposed to change. Sometimes I think about the Buddhist mentality of like having this entropic system, and maybe it should be off the rails. And maybe we are turning Earth into a star and it all has to like dissipate and explode into the ether. And so maybe that's all fine. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this because I've already ranted, and if this show is weird, then it's all weird. George Kalsowski says something that I want to tackle. Fantasy, talking to Fantasy Ecstasy in the chat, says, absolutely, the moon race was built on that, but boy, it deployed a lot of funding, 4% of the budget, and a lot of people, 400,000 people, and technology to do it. So these are numbers, you know, like, that are part of a marketing scheme. That's sadly what it is. Like, if you really go back and look at the numbers of people who actually worked on the deep parts of this mission, it's not those numbers. And I mean, yeah, like, there are records that exist and there are records that don't exist. And the idea that somehow there's a budget that's different for NASA than there is for the military is crazy. Sorry, it's just, I'm just gonna say it, it's crazy. They're one and the same, and they always have been. And so this idea that they're separate isn't, to me, just an illusion, is a public illusion. So I don't think there's any percentage of any budget going anywhere. If the powers that be wanted to run NASA at full capacity, it would be run at full capacity with no limitations on money, because you can print money. So it's not about money. And it was never about Russia, because Russia was where we were trading with Russia, and we allow Russia to pick up our astronauts now. So it's a public facade. I'm just saying it because it's such a thing that everyone uses to say that Apollo was like this real thing, and all these people were working on it, and look at the proof it's in the pudding. But yeah, there were a lot of things that were worked on in private, and I know you weren't talking necessarily about the conspiracy, but for me, that's sometimes the way these things are justified is with numbers. It's like, look at these statistics, it was real. Yeah, but there are a lot of statistics for a lot of things that make things look real, but they're not necessarily real. Ad campaigns do that every single day for almost every single product on Earth. Every single Mac is better than the last Mac. And every single bite of food is tastier than the last bite of food. And so 400,000 people working on Apollo with flag pins, and women who were hidden figures, and rockets that can never be built again, and things like that just are immediately suspicious to me. They're not part of a narrative that makes sense. Because we don't live in that world. We live in a narrative where we have people delivering mail, we have people building websites who have to code websites. You have people who sail ships and they have to tie the ropes. There's no magical elf that comes and does that. And somehow we have to believe in a science where magical elves are taking people to the moon with no casualties, but you can never show or explain how it was done beyond saying you're an idiot. I don't know, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be the debate. If you went into a school right now and asked your astronomy professor and said, hey, listen, like, I'm not crazy. I really want to know how all this stuff was done. How was the radiation handled? Like, how were the astronauts' suits handled? Like, who handles the budget? All this stuff, you'd be laughed at. And that's sad, because we should be able to ask things. And even if we're wrong, I mean, even if my suspicions or even if my are all wrong, who cares? We should be able to talk about things, because that's way more fun than being stuck up about it. Asthmatic says, NASA's compartmentalized. You get paid to build Santa's sleigh. Stats are misleading. George Kalosowski says, each Saturn V was about $500 million to launch. Yeah, man, but I'm saying, like, people like are dropping 50 mil, 100 mil on a movie, on the stupidest effing movie possible. There are budgets. And then what happens is when I say that, people are like, well, Hollywood makes back the money. They make $1 billion in movies. Why would they ever fund rocket missions? Well, because, like, if you really treated the moon missions like an event, you would get planet Earth to buy into this thing. See, this is the biggest tell about the whole thing, is that if it were a total possibility, there would be advertising on the moon already. There would be Coke and McDonald's and Starbucks, like there is everywhere on Earth. It would be like a completely bustling business if it were this thing that was a doable thing. And if it's a doable thing and it's being hidden, it's just as bad. So I don't know where people think that, like, yeah, it was done 50 years ago in complete primitive ways, and because the same people who lie to you about everything else are telling you this one thing that's a really positive thing, we can't even discuss it. George Kalosowski says that a safer BFR rocket, even better shielded than Orion capsule. So I've read a lot about the radiation stuff, and I know that he's a big conspiracy guy, but Jarrah White, I don't know if you guys have followed Jarrah White, he did all the stuff on the radiation, man. He really went in depth for hours and hours and hours on all the different ins and outs, and he's a super big SpaceX junkie, and he has his degree now in geology and several other things, and I'm sure he's probably going to get some sort of physics or rocket science degree. This dude basically says without almost a meter of water shielding, it's almost a death sentence to go anywhere in the realm of 5,000 to 10,000 kilometers around Earth. Now, he's one source, but he's independent, and he's into all this stuff, and he wants it to be real. And so assessing Apollo from a state of mind that, like, radiation is a killer, solar radiation is a killer. It can black out instruments and stuff like that. You know, of course I've heard the fact that, oh, it was so primitive that solar flares wouldn't have affected this calculator spacecraft, et cetera, et cetera. There's always a good answer to the conspiratorial debate. However, if you really go into each and every point just 2 layers deeper or 3 layers deeper, the truth is unraveled, which is the fact that we just don't know for sure. A lot of people think it's for sure. Some people don't, you know. Listen, George Kalosowski says 500 million back 50 years ago, 5 billion now. Seems like Saturn shuttle was 3.2 billion. Adam Starr says, I've always wondered why the supposed satellite technology, why they've never placed a camera on the moon to point back at Earth, not once. I mean, so, you know, there are actually Apollo photos, to be completely fair, where they did have a telescope and they have a picture of Venus from the moon. There are stars from the moon, or allegedly from there. And so these pictures look real. Like, there are some pictures that I feel like I can't say all of this is fake because these pictures look so real. However, the fact that it's not a very common thing to send a robot to the moon today, easily, like Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson or SpaceX or even NASA or any of the other countries' space missions, sending a little robot to the moon with a high-def camera should be a very easy thing. Should be, but it really isn't. And then I feel it's always argued when I say that why would we do that? We've already been there. There are already pictures. It's so boring. But really, for all the reasons I postulated earlier, it's definitely not. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely not boring, and it definitely would bring a lot more money in advertising capital if you actually, attempted it. We'll see. Like, I'm ready to be proven wrong by all these future moon missions. So like once they actually go out there and there's some real footage of the moon today, I'm ready to be proven wrong. So let's do it. But what happens is actually years go by and we never get back to the moon, and just people start getting older and tireder and more part of the system, and then new people start questioning the moon and we still haven't gone. So not to sound cynical, but I hope we do it in my lifetime. Anyway, y'all, it's almost 4 a.m. I think I definitely got to take off and get some rest for work tomorrow, but this was a really fun conversation, aired some dirty laundry about shit that I've been meaning to talk about. I'm sure I've said a lot of this before to y'all, but for me, I'm out of conspiracy land in terms of antagonism and being right or wrong. It's just about let's just feel free to talk and question and be happy with science. It shouldn't be so aggressive and belittling. I know I'm repeating myself, it's late. All right, 3:50 a.m. Have a wonderful day tomorrow. I think I'm gonna try and stream one more time for this 22 Crescent. And otherwise, I'll catch you soon. Take care, everybody. Had a lot of people. Let me try and give y'all a personal shout out. Thanks for staying so long and interacting. I hope no one took anything personally. Wasn't trying to pick on anyone or fight with anybody over anything. George, Fantasy, all y'all, respect. Man, I hope the Chinese send the rover and get some killer footage back. I do. I honestly do. There's no bullshit. I hope it happens. All right, take care, Adam. Thanks, George. Thanks, Fantasy. Starseed, take care. I know you just joined. Take care. Asthmatic, thanks for the convo. Mario Leal, I know you're mentioning a lot of stuff in there. I hope I didn't miss your comments or whatnot. John Hesse, take it easy. All right, everybody. Oh yeah, Kenneth, thanks, man. UFO, just checking out over here. Take care. All right. Just having this last puff over here. Why not? 921 Virgo, thank you. I appreciate it. Let me know if y'all want a shout out. It's a late night, whatever. It's gonna be late. Fantasy says, not at all great convo. We're intelligent people having a fascinating convo about what we're passionate. I wish I'd get paid to do this. Yeah, man, me too. I fucking feel that. But this is good. It's good to in a way, that's why I don't do those donations really and stuff like that very often, because I don't talk about it or kind of try and get money, because it's nice to keep money out of this. Excuse me. Everything is so politicized and monetized and bullshitified. Word, kick-ass, George, and I appreciate the backseat tour, lunar guides. All right, everybody, I'm out. Take it easy.